what is the single most concerning trend you are witnessing in the brain mapping data today?
The first one is anxiety over arousal. Now, I don't know how technical you would like me to get, but what it really is, a beta wave is a much faster undulation, 16 to 25 hertz, and that's focus attention on the ball. And what I'm seeing essentially with excessive interactive screen use is our ability to produce the need to quiet is just essentially what I've found in my research, and it's just reinforced with all the daily work in the clinic, is excessive interactive screen use changes brain waves to an extent that we're always in a state of hyperarousal, okay, that we cannot quiet. It's all algorithm based, everybody knows this, but essentially it brings up our arousal here and we feel very stimulated on the technologies, and then we go offline, and the only thing that will satisfy us is to go back online. So healthy brains means healthy people, healthy states of arousal, any form of arousal. You want the brain and the body become aroused together and come down together, versus the interactive technologies bring us up and keep us there. And this is where we have an absolute epidemic base rhythm of the brain. And here I'm talking about the alpha wave. Everybody thinks alpha is the relaxation wave.
Let's move past the screen time debate to decode the neuropsychological architecture of our digital age. I think it is time to stop following viral trends and start reclaiming the cognitive sovereignty of our brains. Mari, you have coined the term high-tech interference. How do you define this in a way that helps people realize it's not just screen time, but a fundamental shift in our biology?
Interference occurs when our interactive technology use overrides or eclipses something that's important. So the development or maintenance of other healthy behaviors or relationships. But I would say the big concern is with children, because it's literally overriding development. Three things in the general pattern is you get interference when our use facilitates or accentuates, accelerates something negative or something that was previously neutral. So, for example, bullying, yes, it's negative, but it's something, for better, for worse, actually mostly for worse, that just occurs in all cultures. It's designed for inclusion versus exclusion. When in times of famine or war, tribes literally have to define who's in and who's out. So unfortunately, this is a negative natural state. But in yesteryear, people could find groups that they could belong to, but with these massive cyber attacks of bullying, there's it completely eclipses, it completely overrides any opportunity to partake in any other group. It's poison to the nth degree. It's bullying on massive world steroids. So that's one. I mean, the second one is when a natural behavior, a social drive, again, goes to an unnatural dimension. So one of the things we'll probably be repeating over and over again in this interview is there's nothing wrong with a little, there's a lot wrong with a lot. But it could apply to anybody. Somebody picks up a game and then starts gaming, and instead of it being one of the many things they do for a little bit of fun, it takes over their whole life. It takes over all of their interpersonal relationships. So if this is a young child, they don't go out and kick a football around anymore. They don't bug their siblings. They don't do anything. They don't have or they let go of their real life friends. Another example, I don't know who your audience is, but porn is a big issue now as well. So for example, no place for prudeness, having a little peek at porn here and there, okay. But when it completely overrides embodied or person-to-person sexual intimacy, it can be, it destroys relationships. It's very, very it's a big issue in terms of different forms of erectile dysfunction as well, that people cannot get aroused. Typically males, they cannot get aroused within body experience. So that's complete alteration of a quote unquote natural behavior, natural drive.
From my personal experience, professional and personal, of course, in my personal life as well, I noticed also that it actually changed completely the connection. This is about connection. It's about energy connection. It's about a connection of your bodies. You cannot just dismantle this part or these parts. Actually, sorry, it's plural, because they are so fundamental in the connection part. That while you're having a intimate relationship with someone, it might be occasional or not, it is about energy exchange.
Yeah, and all of that is going down the toilet, so to speak.
Mm.
All of the things like again, there's so many dimensions. Of course, there's
Yeah,
the
true.
romantic, the intimate, the sharing of the heart, the body, the mind, everything together. And sometimes there's just raw energy, and the heart may or may not be involved, but it affects all of it. And the male brain is very, very easy to rewire. And essentially, the porn steals that component. And it starts to have addictive properties. And again, it for many, many men, destroys their ability to get an erection or keep an erection with a live person. And one of the ones that's very, very tragic, I'm talking about, men, um, but young boys now. So if a young person's first exposure is pornography, and this is where they discover their bodies, etc., we have forms of what I call juvenile erectile dysfunction now. Okay, 13 to 18-year-old males, they're just discovering their bodies. There's nothing wrong with anything, or there shouldn't be. And here we have it. And it's not like older males, andropause, where there are changes in blood flow and there are changes in testosterone, etc. Hence the use of Viagra, Cialis, things like that. But those don't work when you're dealing with a complete interference due to excessive interactive porn use, because it's not about blood flow or testosterone or anything. It's about the arousal template. So essentially, you're raising the template higher and higher and higher and higher to the point where individuals are not satisfied by embodied experience. And also what they're watching or what they're consuming is more and more and more intense, more and more variety. And even that, sometimes stops working. So that's a big one. But I think, when we talk about this, I think it's very, very important to not go into the prude thing, like everything is evil, but it's always about the override. So there's interference and then there's integration. And integration of interactive technology is where it's a complement. Okay, where something is either a bit better and therefore we adopt it, or it doesn't interfere with other aspects, states, or traits of persons. When any behavior tips over into obsessiveness or compulsiveness. So, essentially where there's no satiation point. Given we just started talking about porn, I'm going to slide into internet dating. That's a really, really good example where interactive technology is destroying, I would say, communities, young people's
Lights.
for
Yeah.
partners, etc. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is there's always more, always more, always more, always more. And I would say in more traditional environments, you meet people at work or at school, you scope things out, you select somebody, and if they're willing and wanting, you date for a little while, and then you figure out, yeah, okay, or no, I'm going to move on to somebody else. But there's time for pair bonding. There's time for something to develop. But when literally or figuratively, you always have this ding, 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 somebody's interest, ding, ding, ding. You're naturally going to look at the potential people that might be interested. So you just get these circular, circular, circular cycles of people always looking for better, always looking for more. And that applies to dating, it applies to the proper washing machine or the sweater or etc. It's kind of a gluttony of opportunity.
We see also global shifts in social behavior and development, as you just kind of also just a second ago mentioned as well. What is the single most concerning trend you are witnessing in the brain mapping data today?
Um, I'd say there are two. The first one is anxiety over arousal. Um,
Oh,
all of my research points to this. Now, I don't know how technical you would like me to get, but the brain, there are all frequencies in the brain. The lay term for this is brainwaves, but what it really is it's literally electrical currents in the brain. We are electrical beings. So the theta wave is slow, calm, quiet. It's 3 to 7 hertz, okay? And it is about calm and relaxing. The beta wave is a much faster undulation, 16 to 25 hertz, and that's focus, attention on the ball. And what I'm seeing essentially with excessive interactive screen use is our ability to produce theta in the region of the brain we need to quiet is just tanking. Okay. Essentially, what I've found in my research, and it's just reinforced with all the daily work in the clinic, is excessive interactive screen use changes brain waves to an extent that we're always in a state of hyperarousal. Okay, and that we cannot quiet. And our use essentially when we follow whatever we're doing, it's all algorithm based. Everybody knows this, but essentially it brings up our arousal here, 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 and we feel very, very stimulated on the technologies. And then we go offline and we're stuck there. We're stuck in this high arousal. Um, and the only thing that will satisfy us is to go back online. So, healthy brains, healthy people, healthy states of arousal, any form of arousal, you want the brain and the body become aroused together and come down together versus the interactive technologies bring us up and keep us there. And this is where we have an absolute epidemic of hyper arousal in all generations, from the itsy bitsy ones to all the way up to elders. The secondary one is it completely and totally hijacks the base rhythm of the brain. And here I'm talking about the alpha wave. Everybody thinks alpha is the relaxation wave. That's an itsy bitsy part of it. Okay. Alpha is the base rhythm of the brain. Okay. You have low alpha, which is quiet. It can be very relaxing, but if it's in the wrong part of the brain, it makes you cognitively very slow. You have what we call peak alpha, which is about, smart. And then you have higher alpha, which really tends to be associated with higher function and higher intelligence. But if it goes too far, it tips into that anxiety again. It's also highly, highly associated with creativity and creative process. Now, everybody thinks about creativity, singing, dancing, drawing. No, no, no. Yes, that's part of it. It's also higher levels of mathematics and innovation, architecture. Almost all entrepreneurs and inventors have this very, very healthy alpha. It's the true thinking outside of the box. And guess what interactive screen use does? It hijacks it. It completely hijacks it. And this is one of the tragedies when, oh my gosh, I'm going back easily 20 years, that you had children that were very, very creative, and you just watched the decline Okay. As in the days it was gaming went up, the creativity would just go down. So those are the two things. We can't quiet, and we lose our curiosity, our world curiosity, and we lose our abilities to innovate, think independently.
Beta usually is our conscious part of it, conscious thinking, guys. Alpha, in short, it's in between conscious and unconscious, so the analytical mind. Theta is the unconscious, so that means internal world. Delta, it's unconscious, which is connected to the deep sleep, as you just mentioned, and the gamma, which is the completely unconscious, but it's the one that actually you transcend. You have that transcendental experience. Is it right, Mary?
Oh boy. Well, I would challenge that in 3 hours. Um,
Okay, okay,
I'm
okay.
putting some humor in. Like that's a really, really easy way to think about things. But I think it's really important for people to know that the complexity of this is extreme.
That's
And
why I
I
try to
think
simplify it for others, Mari. That's why I'm
yeah,
saying,
yeah. But
yeah.
I think we can take your simplified version, but the one thing that's very, very important to note is where in the brain. Okay, so for example, having some beta in the center over the central motor cortex, that's where you want it. That's your focus. That's you're on the ball. That's the consciousness you talk about. But if you have beta in the occiput, that's the place where you want the theta. You want the quieting wave. So if you have beta in the lower back of your brain, that's anxiety, that's insomnia, that's addiction, that's all of these hyper arousal situations. And that's what interactive screens are doing. They're bringing up the beta. More importantly, they're bringing down the theta. So they're taking away your inability to quiet, and they're completely kidnapping and hijacking that beautiful, beautiful, glorious alpha.
You please also tell others what exactly it's your profession, because they have to also understand that you are talking from a position that actually matters, in order for them to really understand that it's from someone that actually knows what they are saying, and they are not just suppositions or things that they are just hypothetically speaking or whatsoever. In that sense, it's not about, because it's not about that.
Oh, I'm even going to give a little intro. One of the major problems online is influencers who are in for the
I agree.
cha-ching, cha-ching,
That's
cha-ching,
why we are
cha-ching.
here, Mary. Thank
Yeah.
you. I
Those
agree.
are the big voices, the exploding
Mm,
voices, the voices that are being listened to and causing a
yes,
whole lot of trouble.
yes, I
Anybody
agree.
who's a doctor, I am a doctor of psychology. My background is, well, I'm BA Fine Arts, MA Education, and then I'm MA and PhD Psychology.
Mm.
So not to do one of these, but I've got the education, and yeah, I've been in directly in this field of psychoneurophysiology. So this is where it's the applied psychology working with the brain, literally reading the brain. I've been doing this for well over 30 years. And before that, it was education. But one of the big issues is voices like mine. We have to be very, very careful when we speak. Okay. So if you get any doctor, so an MD, psychologist, psychiatrist, we're held to a code of responsibility from our professions. Okay. So if I give advice on TikTok or what have you, and somebody says that didn't work for me, I'm responsible. Okay. Versus individuals who have uh, qualifications and regulatory colleges. Okay, when we give, we're essentially only supposed to give advice to individuals we know. Okay, so individual clients. So when we go out and give advice on, I think I mentioned TikTok or whatever it is, there's a liability there. Okay, so you really don't see a lot of voices or people who actually know what they're talking about and actually have credentials. So, and in some of the the podcasts where I do that are designed for professionals who want to learn things, there's all these qualifiers. There's a qualifier at the beginning, there's a qualifier at the end. So yeah, this is something we really, really need to correct. Like, you wouldn't take advice, or you wouldn't go to a person who bought, some dental picks and things. You wouldn't go to that person. You wouldn't go to their garage to have dental surgery, right? So why are we accepting as a culture to get brain advice or psychiatric, psychological advice, or anything from that matter, from somebody who just clicks on a screen without credentials? And it's a big problem, because
It
a
is
lot of the
indeed.
time the public can't tell the difference.
As you just mentioned, Mari, as well. I mean, I have seen, and I still see, unfortunately, again, too many people suffering from anxiety, depression, mental illness, and this is causing because the what is happening. I'm not saying that we are living in a bad society. It is what it is, and how it is. We have to adapt, but to adapt not to fit in, but to adapt to belong. That means that you have to create your inner space, your inner world, and also an external world. Because I have been also talking in previous podcast episode here at Rewire to Rise, things about and connected about this, about belonging and fitting in, and about identity and identity transitions. And it's hard, people. It is hard, Mary. But this doesn't mean that it's impossible.
It's a total delusion. Okay.
Yes,
And when
yes.
this first started, we talked about connectivity. I'll say, no, we're dealing with the huge delusion. When the internet first came out, it was supposed to be about connection. It was about opportunity. It was a gift from heaven. It's a complete delusion. Originally, when we were introduced to these technologies, they were a godsend. And I'll start with the original cell phone. We didn't have to be tied to a physical location to be able to communicate. So it was an absolute joy that you could, not always be at your desk. You could take a business call as you did something else. But at a certain point, we just lost all boundaries, where there was no boundary of work versus home. You were always on. And that's the beginning of the arousal, the negative arousal. Same thing, are you bringing work home, or you're bringing home to work? Just this complete confounding. But where I was going before I digressed is, it's not actually connecting us, it's disconnecting us. Because if we look at research on friends and friendships, no person can have any more than 50 real friends. And I would say, it's lower for most individuals. I would say it's around 20 to have functional relationships. And we know this from animals. And sorry, we are animals. Friendships need to be groomed. And I mean this in a positive way, not in the creepy way. If you look at monkeys, they sit together and they literally groom each other. Horses, same thing. You have to, in order to have a true friendship or a true relationship, you have to actually be present. And what we're completely lacking in our lives now is we have lost what I call the face-to-face and the heart-to-heart. If you do not have face-to-face and heart-to-heart, you do not have a true relationship. Now, before we go all negative, the positive, and in my perspective, the way we should be using the technology is to support our face-to-face and heart-to-heart relationships. Okay, so we're back to interference versus integration. So the interference is when our online lives completely and totally replace our offline lives. But if you have a really good friend who's moved abroad, being able to stay in touch with them online is fantastic. Okay, your sweetheart travels. Yeah, say hello and good night and good morning kisses online. But this should not be the way you interact on a day-to-day basis. Same thing, with grandparents. Many families are cross-continent, not even cross-country. So being able to say, hey, to your grandkids is fantastic. But if your grandparents live around the corner and you don't visit them, it's just an online relationship. Well, that's where all our problems stem from again. It's the override.
Is it possible to have a healthy relationship with digital technology, or does the design of these tools, digital tools, lead to conflict with the human neurophysiology? Is it possible or not? What do you think?
This is a yes answer to both. Okay, so um, the the great unfortunate in all of this is the technologies are literally designed to suck you in and keep you in. So if you follow the way the producers and the platforms want you to use them, you will not have a good relationship, period. Okay. But if you use them as an adjunct, or as I like to say, if you use them as the beautiful tools were originally designed to be, then you have no issue. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to hop to gaming as an example. Okay. All games are essentially designed to have this 2-year cycle. Okay. You buy them, they hook you in, and they keep you in and attached to them. And most of the ones, the way they're designed is you cannot have a positive experience within 20 minutes. It needs to be longer in terms of the cycles of the game. Same
Okay.
thing in terms of the way the players play. You need to be always essentially available, or you're letting down your team, or what have you. The nanosecond the developers come up with a game that doesn't have this insane cycle to it, something that you can be satisfied with 20 minutes of play, then I will support gaming. Okay. But not now, not the way it is designed. It's designed to suck you in and keep you there and keep you in those horrible states of arousal.
Why do we rush to diagnose kids, these little kids? Because I noticed with ADHD or learning disorders, before checking for brain-based inefficiencies first, before we can give a diagnosis ADHD or whatever.
Well, I'm going to get political here. It's a
Please do.
pharmaceutical world. Um, yeah, no, it's a pharmaceutical world, and there's lots and lots of money in it. Okay.
Mm,
The other is, our not just because of technology, but our world is going too fast. In terms of the economy, parents are exhausted. They just don't have the time that they used to have to be present and interact. And of course,
mm,
there's the technology, which I've already talked about. And we'll probably continue to talk, but all of these things, children are abandoned in one way, and they're also overdriven in another. They're in, childhood now is a business, in terms of, taking kids to dance class and music class and hockey, and, it's just all too much. Um, and so I guess where I'm going here is we're asking for children to behave all the time, and we're asking them to be in organized or strict environments all the time. Kids need to be wild. They need to play. They need to get that energy out. There's nothing wrong with a 5-year-old rolling and screaming on the floor. That's what they do. The issue is the parents are so stressed out that this creates a problem. And if you're asking children to spend 8 hours in school paying attention, then an hour and a half after school, depending on if you're in North America or Europe, in football or soccer organized, and then same thing in Kumon, all they just can't. It's not natural. um, and I'd say the second to last point here is I think our expectations are 100% distorted in terms of what's natural for children. And in, I guess, probably up to the 1970s, when children didn't pay attention in school, we punished them physically. We hit them with rulers, corporal punishment. Okay. And then very wisely, the world culture kind of went, hey, it's not good to hit kids. But there was nothing to replace it with. The parenting skills in order to have a child that respected and followed the direction of authority, parents, teachers, etc., there wasn't another method. We essentially directed and controlled children via fear. So, what was the solution? Ritalin, drugs. So we went from hitting our kids to drugging our kids. And what we need to do is go back to that beautiful middle. I think the last point here is something you might have already heard me talk about. I call it manufacturing disability. So when you have a child that misses a learning phase or doesn't catch something quickly, we immediately go, it's some kind of disorder. We do our nice little assessments. We get them special privileges to not do homework or to do lesser. And so the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is manufacturing disability, right? Versus if you teach a child in a different way, or spend the time to go over something that they missed with them, we wouldn't have these issues. My favorite example of this is phonics. Phonics was a magnificent marketing program, but many children don't learn to read with phonics, okay? And we push and we push and we push and we tell them they're not trying hard enough. It's not a system that works. There is a system that works, and we teach this all the time at the Swingle Clinic. It's tracking, right? We teach the child to track, and bam, they can read within 3 to 6 months. And these are older children who have had major troubles. So yeah, be careful, in terms of why curriculum or why certain things were chosen as methods. They don't work with all children.
What kind of methods or way or things as a parent should do in order for them to be aware of?
I despise labels because either children over-identify with them or teachers do, and it simply becomes an excuse. Okay, but one of the things we have to recognize, and I'm going to put political correctness out the window, we are not all made the same. There's incredible variation in persons from the very young to old, and this is not negative. Okay, I like to say the world takes all types. We need all types, and there's a category of I call very busy-bodied children. Okay, and they're much harder to parent. They're much harder to teach. But busy-bodied and busy-brained children, oh my gosh, the adults that they become. This curiosity drives drives teachers nuts because they're always curious about this, that, and the other, not what's being taught. So we quash that curiosity. But if you can, collect your own energy to direct that child, wow, what we can do. One of the basic things is the classrooms are too big. If you have a group of 15 and a child is not standing in line, it's not a big deal. But if you have a classroom of 30 and 3 children are, or 5 of them, or even 10 of them, then you've got a big problem. It's a classroom management issue. Very frequently, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the children. Okay, it's the anxiety of the adults around them and the need for management. Now, we cannot bash parents. We cannot bash teachers. There's something wrong with the system. Okay, parents need much more support. They need emotional support. They need physical support. Babysitters, neighbors, friends. Okay, and I would even say at this point, financial support. Right. Same thing with the school system. A lot of the money is going into admin and into aides. So many aides assisting children with disabilities and whatnot, as opposed to more teachers and smaller classrooms.
How does our obsession, again, because we have talked almost constantly from the first beginning about this, with digital speed, prevent children from mastering this essential development milestones?
Wow. Well, I mean, it's all of it. I mean, we can go from iPad in the cradle,
Mm,
when you, this is basic attachment, basic attachment. Children are craving interaction. They need to feel
that's
your
true.
chest, your breast. When you put them in a cradle with an iPad, you're literally replacing yourself with an object. So, of course, the child is going to attach to the object instead of a person. And then you're surprised that they won't listen to you. No, you've already set up that their relationship is with an object. Okay. And then what happens when you take this object away? They cry, they scream, they tantrum. Okay. And you try and soothe them. No, you weren't there at the setup. They actually now need this object to feel safe and soothe. Okay. So that's just one of the basics. An example I love to do, and I don't have an issue with embarrassing myself on screen, but there's a game that's in, why not? Uh, there's a game that's in every single culture on this planet, peekaboo. Okay, so all cultures play it, and I'll do this series, which is you cover your face and then you come back, hey, cover your face, cover your face, and you just do all of this. What are you teaching? You're teaching facial expressions. You're teaching how to read facial expressions. None of that is happening on a screen. So, we talk about manufacturing disability. Many children have characteristics of autism. Now, they don't have autism. They have not had the opportunity to learn facial expressions. They don't know how to read other people.
That's
And this
interesting.
is our fault. Yeah. And how do we continue with that game? First of all, a little joke. No sane parent ever ends the sequence on a mad or weird face. They always end on a funny or very welcoming smile. But we play with our hands. Then we tend to play with a baby blanket or a tea towel. Then we go behind the sofa. Then we go behind the door. What are we teaching? We're teaching safety and permanence. You're teaching that you'll always come back. Okay. So there's
Oh,
so many
that's a
examples.
healthy one. This is really important. This is strong, really
It is.
strong.
It is. Yeah. So we're not doing any of those things anymore. And then we wonder why the children are dysregulated. It's because we've
Oh,
critically affected their development, right?
yes.
And you look at all other things, when parents are busy, it's like, oh, what do I do? I don't have keys here, but you give them jingly keys
Yeah.
and stuffy toys and things. And a lot of people say, well, isn't that the same? I'm like, no, no. All of those things have extinction, meaning after a certain age, keys, I don't want to play with keys or stuffies, you know, versus the interactive technology, the phones and the tablets. Um, it, they don't go extinct. There's more and more and more and more, and the relationship gets stronger and stronger and stronger. This is a really good time for a loop around. What is one of the defining characteristics of autism? Okay, their interests don't get they don't go extinct. They grow, and they tend to be in typical terms odd obsessions, like having things in a row, or having a fascination with trains and only trains, right? Yeah. So no, we're really affecting development at its core. I have many examples, and yeah, it's not just the kids; it's the parents. Another one I work with. Yeah, so many. At this point, it would be adolescents. Oh gosh, going back 15 years, and the parent was always complaining that the child was on the phone, and the parents is like, "What the blah 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 are you talking about? You're always on your phone, right?" So we don't have that natural bonding, and what a lot of parents don't realize is when you're on your phone, you're rejecting your child. You're not there. Okay. And I don't mind sharing my age. I'm 1 year away from 60. um, but in my generation, okay, the worst punishment you could give a child was the silent treatment, was ignoring the
Ooh.
child. Okay, and that's what we're doing to our children now. I'm going to suggest some ageism here. My generation is the last generation on the planet that knows what life was without interactive screens. My point here is my generation's development was complete. That's a key point. Now, a lot of us were, I'd say there are two ways that people, we call it digital immigrants versus digital natives. I would say the millennials onwards are digital natives versus I'm a digital immigrant. And just the way immigration occurs for anything, a lot of people go to a new culture and they drop everything. They eat the food of the new culture, they dress the new culture, they learn the language of the new culture. So in my generation, many were accused of being Luddites, so those who just rejected the technology. So yes, there were, and that's the one aspect of the digital immigrant, but there are many who integrated. But my key point here is I think before the information and the experience is lost, I really suggest that people talk with, I guess at this point, their elders. We have a big critique, though, so I'm going to say people in their 70s and above now, how, oh, they didn't integrate well with the technology. Initially, yes, but you'll find people in their 70s and their 80s now, I think, are the healthiest users of interactive technology, the healthiest, because they still value the face-to-face and heart-to-heart. Now, loneliness, different story. When anybody is lonely, then of course they go down the hole as well. Okay, but yeah, look at how your grandparents use technology. It tends to be the better way.
When a patient arrives feeling confused and or in pain, how do you help them pivot from what's wrong with me towards or to what is my brain doing to me, for example? I think
Yeah,
it's so
well,
important.
I go with learning theory as opposed to pathology. Okay. And this is where we literally scan the brain. We see how the brain is working, and I talk to them about regions of the brain that are efficient. You always need the positive, and regions of the brain that are inefficient. Okay, and what that connects to. Okay, and then we literally teach the brain how to be more efficient. So again, if we stick with learning theory, it's not like you're broken, you can't do anything. It's you haven't learned it yet. Okay, so I'll give you a classic example, which is the balance in the frontal lobes. Okay,
Mhm.
so when the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain are working in unison, okay, are balanced, then we have emotional regulation. Okay, when one side is more dominant, and in all the different waves. I'm not going to go into that detail, but they're different forms. But that tends to be associated with either depression or anger or whatnot. So it's a very, very good example in terms of how we teach the person to get the frontal lobes working, matching, and then working in unison. Okay, so it's learning theory. Okay, it's not pharmaceutical. Okay, we're working with the electrical basis that then produces the chemicals versus pharmaceutical. You give the chemicals. It's the next layer. So first our brains are electrical and then they're chemical. So you help them with the electrical and then you get the chemical balance.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Mari, that also again for other people who might not have all this knowledge about the brain and its functions, and please again correct me if I'm wrong. So we have the left brain and we have the right brain, guys. So the left brain is usually connected to logic, memory, and language. The right brain it's usually connected to emotions, intuition, and as you mentioned earlier, creativity. Just for people to kind of give them a shortcut or something like that in order for them to kind of make a picture in their head or in front of their eyes.
So I would say that's 50% true.
Okay.
This is what we really believe for years and years. But
Okay.
I would say over the past 40 years, we're looking at left and right in a very, very
Oh, please tell me. I'm so
way.
curious.
Yeah. Well, again, if we talk about, Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Okay, so these are the names of people who discovered that language, sits on the left side. So yeah, language is on the left side. So communication makes sense. But then there are also the balancing of the waves across both sides. So what I'm talking about is mood, executive function, not just logical versus creative or emotive. So there are two pictures, and I would say they go on top of each other. What you say, there's nothing wrong with that, but we have so much more now. Last but not least, creativity. I wouldn't do that left right. That's occipital alpha, and alpha again is through the brain. So we have a level of detail now that's fantastic. I'm going to do another little poke though at psychiatry and psychology for that matter. I mean, we used to be the only discipline that never looked at the organ that we study and we treat.
Hmm.
Okay, so for depression, oh, try this pill, doesn't work. Oh, try that pill. Oh, try. Now, when we look at the brain and we look at the electrical activity in the brain, we can see it. Okay, not that I want neurotherapy or brainwave therapy to be used this way, but we can also tell which pharmaceutical is going to work versus which is going to make it worse. But please, I don't want that to be the way it is, because we can teach the brain, instead of giving a pill, we can teach the brain to regulate itself. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a time and place for medication, but not the way we're just throwing it at people now. When we look at the electrical activity of the brain, it tells us about what's going on in the chemical. And we can correct, we can teach an individual to change the electrical function of the
Mm.
brain, which inherently changes the chemical function. You can, repair or cure certain forms of depression only working with balancing the electricity in the brain, which in turn helps with the chemical. But our
Wow.
culture is they're pro-chemical. But when you work with the brain and the electrical, you get a training effect instead of a treatment effect. So with pharmaceuticals, you take the pill, you feel better. You take the pill, you feel better. You take the pill, you feel better. Stop taking the pill, you don't feel better. Okay. Versus with brain therapies by qualified people, underline that, qualified people. You take the pill, so meaning you work with the brain, you feel better. It stays. You have trained the brain to learn something. So we're back to learning theory. Okay. The brain has learned to balance its bursts of electricity, so that you have emotional regulation. So that helps with anger, it helps with depression, things like that.
Why are we so quick to follow these digital trends, and what is the actual risk to the developing brain?
Well, these are the bloody influencers, and the before that, it was the producers of the technology. Well, one of the things, when I wrote my first book on this, and I wrote that in 2013, I
Oh,
said we're in a live experiment. We're introducing all these technologies, and we have no idea of the effect of on our biology and behavior. Okay, so same thing with the white noise. Yeah, the principle makes sense. And if you have a screaming baby or whatnot, I get it. Believe me, I get it. But there's a purpose to this. And again, you are needed. When you put white noise, you block out everything. And the child never learns to differentiate good sound from bad sound. Okay. And then, of course, they habituate to the point they're not going to be able to sleep without this white noise. Okay, imagine as a child, then a teenager, then you're dating and you're having your first romantic sleepover and you can't fall asleep because you don't have your white noise machine. I mean, come on. But this is the setup. But going back, when you play a white noise in the background, like when a child usually goes to bed, they'll hear a parent, okay? And they'll learn that the noise of the parent yip yapping or whatnot, well, that's a safe noise. There's no danger to it, okay?
Mhm.
They'll be, let's just say a parent decides to, please don't do this. Well, you probably already know this, unload the dishwasher when the child isn't. You're going to hear the clink, clink, clink. And you're going to learn that this is actually a nice domestic sound. There's no danger to it, okay? Now, if there's a bam, bam, bam on the door at 3 a.m., they're going to learn that there's a danger to that. So essentially, what you're doing by not playing white noise or any of the noises for that matter is you're teaching the child to learn to be safe and function in a real world environment and not block things out. So they won't have dependence on this noise, but they'll also learn what is safe and what is not safe.
How do you train a brain to stay calm and curious as well in a digital world designed to make us anxious, as we have talked?
Get off of your interactive devices. Okay. You want balance, 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 right? You know, and I say face to face, heart to heart. You need balance. I'm not anti technology. I'm anti too much technology.
Mm. Mari, you also use neurofeedback to target underlying inefficiencies. Can you please explain this to someone who thinks their focus, quoting again, is just a matter of willpower? Because I think this word willpower, it's a little bit underestimated, and a lot of people still kind of use it in the wrong way and doesn't know really the meaning of it and the power of it. That's the whole point.
Well, children need to learn how to learn. Okay.
Mhm.
And we have to teach them how to learn. Okay. So that's the basis one. But when we look at the brain, and I'm going to use that label I hate, ADHD. So it's just, it used to be just the catch-all for anything, quote unquote, wrong with the child. When we actually look at the brain, there are 14 different regions and patterns that influence focus. Okay.
Okay.
One of the things, the absent ADHD or inattentive ADHD, and I essentially discovered that there's a whole swath of ADHD which is actually based in anxiety. It's the opposite. So these are the children for which some of the medications, specifically methylphenidate, Ritalin, etc., were disastrous because that isn't what it was. So these are the children that or adolescents, they study, 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 study. They have it, and then they go to write the test and they blank. Okay, that's anxiety. Okay. There's another form of quote unquote ADHD, and I call it pernicious ADHD. This is one of the worst, I would say, forms. So, on basic interaction with the world, and when the lessons are quote unquote easy, okay. But the second the lesson gets harder, the brain literally goes in the wrong direction. So when they really try and focus, the brainwave associated with quiet goes up. So for these children, the more you say, focus, focus, apply yourself, the harder it gets. And these are the kids that the smart ones, they figure out anywhere between 9 and 14. If I don't try, I can't fail. Okay, so these are the ones essentially who stop trying. They get what I call behavioral protection, behavioral defense mechanisms, right? So they're like, yeah, I didn't try. So if I don't try, I can't fail. And they become children with behavioral issues as opposed to children with scholastic issues. Yeah, they just get this bravado, etc., going on. But it's really, it's a brain issue in terms of Yeah, the wrong juice is going into the brain. It's kind of like, I like analogies of a car, you know, that as long as the road is nice and straight, put, on you go. Not an electrical car, old-fashioned car. Uh, and then when the road starts to go curvy, your car slows down and goes into neutral. And when it's really curvy, it starts to go in reverse.
What is the biggest barrier you encounter when you tell to a client that they need to do the work, because you sometimes you have to change their brain map. How do you do that, professional?
It's readiness. They're just not ready. Um,
I agree.
and
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I'm known for my very direct approach. Um, and you have to figure out what a client needs. So there are, and this is where I get into arguments with my colleagues. People who do therapy for years and years and years. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a time for witness. People need to tell their stories, so then you become a listening therapist. But after a certain point, if all you do is listen, you're part of the problem. Okay. So it's about, determining the readiness. I call myself, I'm an action-oriented therapist. Okay. I interrupt clients when they, go really, really far into the deep pain. I'm like, okay, we have a decision to make. Do you need me to hear you out, or do we just slice this? Okay, let's, consider slicing this, getting you out of this pain. And how do we get you out of this pain? Probably for a while. It takes courage to knock on a door.
How do you pair brain training with the traditional therapy to create a more lasting transformation, Maris?
Yeah,
That actually might be also useful for others just to listen, hearing them out, and seek
yeah,
for help
yeah.
if needed.
Well, if talk therapy doesn't work, clients, I almost always start only with the brain. Okay.
Mhm.
And then after around 6 sessions, when the brain is learning to shift, that's when we do the talk therapy, because it's more effective.
For the person who feels their life is being run by an algorithm, what is one immediate step they can take today to regain control?
So the first one is just cut the algorithm on a daily basis. So every single day, clean your computer, and every single day, clean your phone. And you can Google how to do this, and just it snaps the algorithm. The other is, I know there's this big AI push now. Don't use it unless you really, really, really have to. And with a pen, not a pencil. The way you think is very, very different. And on your phone, when words are suggested, etc., don't take the suggestions. Do something different, because this is about thought control. So whenever you don't have to, don't play the game. Take back control.
By the way, we have talked just earlier about this. You also develop an app, right? That is actually connected to the brainwave that we have talked earlier. Is that true?
Yeah, very much so. So you've heard me talk about what we do with the brain in sessions in the clinic,
Mhm.
um, but we've developed an app. Um, the second one is focus, and the third one is sleep. So BrainCom, what we do is we have combined heart rate variability, which you can look up. It's a way to quiet the body through resonance frequency and breathing. There's a lot of really good literature behind this. And then, of course, what the Swingle Clinic is really, really known for are our harmonics. So all of those brain waves that I've been talking about, what we're doing is we're blending those frequencies. So we're stacking them and we're lining them up at sub-auditory threshold. So your brain receives it, but you can't actually hear it. And then we put colored noise on top. It
Ooh.
is so, so, so powerful. Now, all those critiques about all the influencers, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons and tons and tons of wellness products out there. Lots of people claim to be doing this. Ours has solid research. We know exactly what it does, where it does it in the brain. And there are many mechanisms of action. So out of science talk, what that means is there are many different brain waves that are affected. And because there are many ways to access, it universally essentially helps everyone. And we have, as I said, data studied in the clinic ad nauseum. So please check that out if you feel you would benefit from quieting. The second one, sleep, completely and totally self-explanatory. It helps with insomnia. So
Wow.
sleep onset, trouble falling asleep, and followed by sleep, night waking. And if you recall my talking about training, our apps, again, they train the brain. Many people choose to use them every night. Last one, focus. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. So many different programs on it. It's not just your straight, inattentive focus, but there's creative focus. I've done a lot of work with elite musicians and composers and writers in terms of very different types of focus than what I call for the regurgitator. So if you're a student trying to write an exam, you just need to pack it in there and spit it out for the exam. So very, very different types of focus. The instructions are beyond detailed. Yeah, I'm really proud of what we were able to do. It's actually a collaboration between the Swingle clinic and a company out of Italy. So, and Ferrari, I believe, as well, in terms of sound chambers. So in terms of the, really how to get the sound tuned to change and affect the brain. And then another psychologist is involved, and she's very, very talented a person as well. So it's the three of us that built this. We used to be on good old tapes and CDs, etc. And then when the technologies came in on the phones, it wasn't working because you have to open and collapse the files, and the therapeutic effect, we lost it. So this is where I had to team up, and we had to beat the technology. It's not designed for therapy. So there's tons of, there was like 3-4 years went in behind this. So please have a look. swinglesonic.com. We've worked it so that it's very, very easy to use after you read all the instructions. Please do. And we think very, very affordable.
You have contributed also to the standards of neurotherapy for the American Psychological Association, right? Where do you see the field of brain health moving in the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, I think we're in trouble, and I think people need to educate themselves. All the problems we've talked about before, like who has the platforms, people without education or knowledge. I don't mean, people can be really, really smart without formal education. Don't get me wrong, but people who want to sell you things without the knowledge, etc., behind. And I can talk about the field of neurotherapy in general. I mean, you have to do your due diligence. It's not take a weekend workshop, buy a piece of equipment, hang a sign, and say they can treat your brain. It's a horrible, horrible situation. Same thing, all of these apps and homeware and remote devices, the majority of them they're under wellness classification, which means they don't have to prove what they do. They don't even have to prove their safety. In our clinic, we only use FDA, Canada Health equivalent, and European medical grade devices. And unfortunately, it's the proliferation of these wellness things. Now, if you do your due diligence, you find people what they call complementary competence. So you find an MD, a psychiatrist, a psychologist who's trained also in neurotherapy, and then you're in really, really good hands. But you have to do your homework. You have to do your homework. So saying all that, if the trend as continues, where it's just sexy women bopping around saying, buy this, the discipline is really, really in trouble if that is the loud voice.
Definitely,
Science, we
absolutely.
need our science back. Science,
Yeah.
science, science, science.
So at this point, Mari, as a professional, how do you protect your own brain from the very high-tech stressors you study? How do you do that? I'm
With
curious.
great difficulty.
I know something.
I attach my own head to the equipment. If I have a really long, tiring day, yeah, I'll one of the staff will hook me up and help myself to quiet. And that's one of the nice things about working here. We all do use it. So it's kind of like having your own ice cream parlor uh, in your shop. So that, but the other is, I always say to everybody and underline parents, have rules, have rules. Doesn't matter what they are,
True.
have rules. So whether it's what time you turn your screens off at night, how many hours, I highly suggest that people have what I call significant blocks without any technology. Okay. So
I
whether
do
that's,
that as well. Thank you, Mari.
no, you have to, whether it's, every single, no phones at the dinner table, or whole weekends where there are no phones, vacations without interactive technology. When you go for a walk, don't take your phone. Now they have us, okay? Because many people, you can't open or close your house door, your car door. You can't, I'm going to go back to ice cream. You can't buy an ice cream without your phone. So be really careful about this universal utilitarianism, right? And know yourself. Sometimes I get caught. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a saint in all of this. I do a lot of international travel, so my hours are kind of upside down. Yeah, I always used to have a rule that after a certain hour, everything would go off. I wouldn't never look at emails or anything over the weekend. I had very strict rules. All my friends knew this. All of my colleagues knew this, and they just knew that if they sent something, Friday after 5, they're not going to get a response until Monday. Okay. Now with my business now, that's just not possible, right? And also with the speed you're expected, if you don't respond like this, they move on to something else. So I think enough of us have to do it so that the pattern changes, right? But talking a little sweetly, if all your friends know you turn off your phone from here to there, you might get a
Boundaries. So
lovely.
you have to create your own boundaries. So everyone has to know clearly what are those and which are those.
And you'll be surprised at what can happen. You might have a lovely
Yes,
little
I
knock on the
agree.
door, and somebody
Yeah.
arrives with a bottle of Prosecco and says, "Hey, you know, what are you doing right now? Do you want to sit down and enjoy this with me?"
When we finally start taking brain health as seriously as physical fitness, because we were talking about that as well, what does that rewired society look like to you?
Utopia.
Mm. It is, right?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think when we unwire, we're going to get back to being individuals instead of this hive collective. Okay. We're becoming more and more of a hive collective, which I don't think is healthy. You know, I can do all these lovely Star Trek Borg things, but I mean, strangely enough, when with all these suggestions of what to write, what to buy, et cetera,
Yeah.
all the AI, you're making us all think the same way. I think if we disconnect enough and take care of ourselves, we're going to go back to beautiful, beautiful variety in people. Remember, I said earlier, the world takes all types. Not does it only take all types, it needs all types. But I think if we really take care of our brains, we're going to get into a good enough state. And here I emphasize not good enough, but good and enough. And I
That's
trust
good.
that we'll have higher cognitive and emotional frequency, which will lead to higher satisfaction and, yeah, happiness.
Mary, thank you so much. We have arrived to the end of this podcast episode. I really appreciate so deeply all the info and all the details that you have offered us to me and my listeners. I'm pretty sure they will appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been my absolute pleasure.